but I was just afraid that at some point a module that maybe wasn't fully secured, a big gust of wind would come up and pull that module. And then you're looking at a 200-foot drop to either Broadway Street, which is one of the busiest streets, or 281, which is one of the busiest highways. And the thought of that gave me, that would keep me up at night more than anything else.
Welcome, everybody, to the very first episode of Radio Free Tenacity, the voice of worker safety. I'm your co-host, Al Bukowski, joined by our worksite safety specialist, Allie Thunstrom. Hey, Allie, how's it going?
Hey, Al, doing well. Excited to officially kick off the podcast here.
You and me both, friend. And actually, before we dive into today's episode, I'm thinking we should probably let the listeners know what they're in for with Radio Free Tenacity.
That's probably a good idea. So what would you say we're trying to accomplish here?
Well, I would say that this podcast is made by and for those folks who are utterly obsessed with making the workplace a better place, specifically a safer, more productive workplace. And to that end, we'll be going inside the minds of the folks responsible for some of the most innovative safety work you're going, in addition to chatting with our friends out in the field, the ones out there leading work crews to great things, but facing plenty of challenges along the way. Folks like today's guest, Patrick Attwater of 180 Solar.
Absolutely. I mean, I first met Patrick a few summers ago in San Antonio as 180 Solar took on one of the largest high-rise solar builds in U.S. history. It was definitely one of the most dramatic construction projects I've personally ever been on. I mean, you think of San Antonio, you have high winds, scorching summer heat, and tons of at-height work. By the time all was said and done, the 12-story office tower and its 6-story mid-rise companion in the Pearl District were equipped with over 2,900 solar panels, which, for those of you that aren't familiar, that's enough to generate 1 megawatt of power.
Yeah, I mean, I remember following this project closely when you were down there with the rest of the Ergodyne team. And I mean, some of those photos we got from that build are just astounding. Like, you can just feel that Texas heat coming off of some of those images, and the footage of those crew members walking hundreds of feet above the building on steel beams right over major highways. I mean, forget about it. It's ridiculous. And actually, our listeners can go to the Tenacious blog on ergodyne.com and search solar for videos and pics of that project. Absolutely incredible stuff.
Oh, 100%. And I got up there on top of that building with some of them, and the way that they walked across those beams, just so worry-free, was just alarming, but also really cool to see. I mean, they are, ahead of the game and top of their class in this type of industry. And they really are, 180 Solar is truly out there doing great things. And Patrick was kind enough to sit down with us recently to talk about that Pearl District project and what they did on the bottom line to really ensure everyone's safety, despite some major challenges and potential hazards, as you mentioned previously.
Without any further ado, let's take a listen to that chat. Here's Patrick Attwater of 180 Solar.
All right. So welcome to the podcast, Patrick, first and foremost. So you are the CEO of 180 Solar. Can you tell us a little bit about the company, its mission, and, what motivates you to kind of do what you do?
Yeah, those are good questions. So yeah, Patrick Attwater, CEO of 180 Solar. We started the company almost 7 years ago now. So we've been at it for a while, and I've been in the solar industry for 12 years. And so I'm relatively young, but kind of a grandpa in the solar industry because it's such a young industry. It was back when I was in college. I was looking around and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, like most people when they're in college. And after a lot of research, I decided that solar made the most sense for me. It was infinitely scalable. You could do it on a small scale. You could do it on a really large scale. So I liked that we could find a niche somewhere in there that would be a good fit for me, at least.
We did have the privilege of being with you and your crew in the Pearl District on the solar build. After the completion of that, how did the Pearl District project kind of fit within your mission, and how did that really make a improvement to that area in general?
That's a great question. And I guess to give everybody a little bit of background, there's a great video that was made that kind of does a good high level overview of the partnership that we had on that project. So that's a good place to start. But this is we were brought in, and we're so lucky to have this opportunity right in our backyard too. So we're doing work around the country, but this happened to be where we're headquartered down in San Antonio. And we have some very forward-thinking leaders down there that are doing some amazing things on this front. But we built, so this is going to be, I can't imagine another office tower being more sustainably built. So this has geothermal, rainwater capture, a perfectly tight building envelope, like maybe record setting type seal. I mean, like a building envelope. And then we designed, engineered, and built the largest solar project on a high-rise building in the US, maybe in the world. We don't know, but we haven't found one bigger. And so it's 2,700 modules, anywhere from 150 to 200 feet in the air on top of these two office towers. And they all combine to feed the South Tower, which is going to be it's the new headquarters for Credit Human. It's a federal credit union headquartered in San Antonio. They're the ones who really, the CEO there is brilliant and really was the one who made this a priority for this new headquarters. And we're going to produce somewhere north of 95% of the remaining load for that building. And this is I can't remember how many square feet, but it's 12, 13 stories. This is unheard of. Normally a solar array on top of a building like that would produce 5, 10, or 15%, but we were able to use 3 different rooftops. And they were able to get their building consumption down so much that we're going to produce hopefully somewhere, north of 95% once it's fully occupied. But to do this, we had to do something that had never been done before, which is raise a solar array up off the roof at those heights, so that we could use all of the available space, because otherwise we have restrictions on fire lanes, and there's HVAC equipment on the roof and other things that would have prevented us from getting that much power on the roof. So by raising it up, not only are we able to fit as much power as possible, we're also able to turn it into a real feature of the building. And that's what also it became, is the crown jewel of the whole project. It's the one thing that's really visible about the sustainability. The other things aren't as easy to see.
Not to brag, but I did get to install a couple of those solar panels on top of the roof, or help the crew with that. And
there's photo proof.
There is photo proof. Yeah. I mean, it was such an incredible experience. And exactly like you said, you're up there in the elements, and those things can become a sale. And so to have a really cool experience and understanding of what they actually are dealing with was just incredible. And, like you mentioned, there was a lot of challenges, being at heights being one of them. So when you and your team kind of looked at how to mitigate those risks, what are some of the key features that you guys really wanted to focus on? And almost more importantly, but how did you get your crew to buy into it? Because we all know that there can be a lot of resistance to additional safety features, and, especially items that they don't typically use on the ground. So what were kind of some of the things that you guys thought about, and how did you get that buy-in from your workers?
Great questions. One, everybody knew going into it, this was a special project, and we really tried to make that clear, even though I think it was in that, just being on site, you got a sense of that. So we didn't have to remind them too often, but sometimes it was good. We sit down and explain how important this project was. But along with that, they knew that it was a technically challenging project, that we all had to be careful and work together and watch each other's backs and be at the very top of our game when it came to safety. And there was no room to slip up. We just didn't, because, one of the things I was, not only for our guys hanging off the roof, but I was just afraid that at some point a module that maybe wasn't fully secured, a big gust of wind would come up and pull that module. And then you're looking at a 200-foot drop to either Broadway Street, which is one of the busiest streets, or 281, which is one of the busiest highways. And the thought of that gave me, that would keep me up at night more than anything else. So that was always, these were the focuses that we put, were, making sure that these guys were watching each other's backs, that we had all the right safety equipment, that we were never taking risks, that we were always being measured in any part of the installation that we were working on, and that everything was secured up there on the roof, that everything was tethered and held in place before, to make sure that it was mechanically fastened. It was all secured before that, just just to make sure it didn't fall off the roof. And then also we had a great working with Joris, who was the general contractor on that project, working alongside them. They were really great, and they had very strict safety protocols. They knew how important this project was and how visible it was, and just making sure that all the safety was followed from the top down. So yeah, I'd say that, definitely a team effort.
That's great. It seems like from what you're saying, like, there didn't take much. Like, people were already invested in their own safety. Like you said, that it was a very visible project. Everyone was excited to be on it. It didn't seem like, much had to be done to empower your crew to face those challenges and guarantee that they go home safe and sound.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone saw that this was going to be. It's when you're looking at that steel and you see people hanging off the steel, that it's something to be taken seriously. There was no point where it felt laxed in that sense. But I think it was just, we were always having the conversation, always, it was always talked about throughout, every day, multiple times a day, we're talking about it, and everyone knew how important it was that we all went home safe every day. So I'd say that it wasn't so much that there was no work involved in building that culture, in that people, to get there. But, I think, because I want to give credit to all our site managers, construction managers, project managers, GC, and everybody was really involved in making sure that that was a priority. So that just became the culture on site. But yeah, also, it's a little different than if you're on just a big flat roof on a warehouse building, one story up. People just, it's a little easier to not feel that tension. But when you're up there on the roof, you just naturally have a little more tension when you're at that height.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of creating the culture on the site, and from being there for the few days that we were, I will say for sure I was super impressed with, the GC, like you mentioned, Joris. They were phenomenal. And I know I did a safety walkthrough with their safety superintendent, and the level of detail that he put into everything, and had no issue in calling people out if he felt like they weren't abiding by it. And everybody was very receptive to it. That was super impressive. And then even further, I think it was Oliver that was kind of managing it on your side. And I mean, throughout the days that we were there, it was super hot, which we'll get into how you had to, not only did you have to deal with heights, but you had to deal with the extreme heat. He always made sure to multiple times a day check on the guys and make sure that they were doing okay, encourage them to drink water and to take breaks and to use cooling towels and different modalities to ensure that they were cooling their body properly. But as every row that we went down with the solar panels, there was a second where everybody stopped and said, are the scaffolds safe? Are the bars safe? Everything was checked time and time again. And it was just super impressive. And I think exactly like you said, there was a culture there that valued it. And that definitely very impressive to see how everybody worked together to ensure that not only themselves, but the people they work with are remaining safe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always have, so for every project, when you have a project that size, you've got a whole team on it. And so we've got a project engineer, we've got a project coordinator, PM, and usually multiple project construction managers and a project executive. And so all those people work together to see this project through the construction phase. And Oliver is one of our construction managers, does an amazing job. He's a young guy, a lot of energy, really takes his job seriously, did an awesome job. And I think that's a great point. And yeah, and so it really is that team effort, everyone buying in, everyone taking it seriously.
What do you have on tap now? What kind of projects do you have out there that get you excited, like to the level that you're obviously excited to work on this Pearl District project?
One of the ones we're working on right now that has turned out to be, it's going to be a really cool project, is down in Florida. We're working on a new botanical gardens, or it's not a new botanical, it's an existing, it's been there for a long time, the Marie Selby Botanical Gardens. And they have real big ambitions to make this the first net positive, not just net zero, but actually create more renewable energy than the building uses, botanical complex in the world. And so we're helping them with that. And we're right in the middle of design and engineering right now. And that'll go to construction towards the end of the year, early next year. And that's going to be amazing. It's going to be basically the same size as the Pearl project, but all on one structure rather than three. And then in return, we're going to have the first net positive certified restaurant in the country. We're going to have the first net positive certified botanical complex in the country, and a slew of other awards that they're going for. And they really want to set the example down there. But it's right on the ocean. It's going to look like some giant waves on top of this parking garage and building. I think it's going to be beautiful, and it's also got its own challenge. We got hurricane force winds. We're still pretty high up in the air, but then you throw in the hurricane force winds, the environmental challenges we'll have down in southern central Florida. So that's one of the ones that I'm really excited about coming up.
That's super incredible for sure. And another project that you're going to have to deal again with cooling and all of that and tool tethering, like you mentioned. So when you're looking at all of the challenges that go into a build like this, and again, keeping your workers safe, what kind of advice would you have for organizations facing similar challenges and safety risks? How should they navigate that conversation, get the buy-in, and create the culture that we've seen on your job sites to date?
And I don't want to come off as a safety expert, because there's people out there that really that's what they do, and we really value. A lot of times we bring in consultants on a new project to help us understand what those risks are. So we don't take for granted that we've been on a lot of job sites and we've seen it all. We really look at every project as a new opportunity to get better and to learn something new. And so I'd say that's always step one, is humbly approaching every project with bringing in people that really know the things that you might be missing, so that you can make it as safe as possible. And then it's really pretty basic from there, which is that it requires good planning. You got to sit down and really think through and imagine the project from start to finish, and what challenges you will come up against, and then what solutions you need to solve those problems or those challenges. And having the right solutions is critical. And I think that's where you guys really come in a lot of ways. On this Pearl project, we use so many of your guys's tools that were extremely useful. And we didn't even really talk about it yet, but keeping these guys cool. So really we hit the peak of construction before we got the modules, or as we're installing the modules, in the peak of the summer in South Texas. It was hot up there. Once the modules went in, they were able to work underneath, and there's a lot of shade created. But before those modules went in, it's brutal heat. So just keeping those guys cool was an enormous challenge, of setting up shelter for them up on the roof, making sure they had cooling vests and cooling devices, and constantly making sure they're always hydrated, taking lots of water breaks, getting them into the shade as much as we could. That is definitely taken for granted. And I think in general, when people are driving by a construction site, hopefully they always keep in mind and have a little empathy for all the guys that are out there in the middle of that summer heat working, because it's the real deal. It's really challenging, and it's actually, just as much, just like most things, it's usually a win-win. When those guys are comfortable and taken care of, they're going to be better workers too. When they're miserable and they're really struggling out there and they feel like people don't care, that's when you're not going to get 100% out of people. So safety to me isn't an expense. It's not something to be taken lightly. It's, if you do it right, it shows that you care, and it shows that you want the best for those guys that are out there working hard. And in return, you can be pretty sure that you're going to see the better work, their best work. And that's really what it's about.
Patrick, those are great words to end on. I can't thank you enough for joining us today, and for kind of allowing us to be part of the glory in projects like the Pearl District build, and hopefully many more to come.
Yeah, well, and thank you guys for making great gear that makes it all possible, that the guys in the field really love, and makes all the difference in the world for them, and your guys' partnership on this project, because you really made a big difference too. And it was just great having you out on site. I think it made the guys feel real special to have your crew out there, and they felt like they were doing something special that would entice you guys to come down and make a story about it. So I think it was a real win-win. So always great partnering with you guys, and keep up the good work on your end.
All right. Have a good one, Patrick. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And we're back on Radio Free Tenacity, the voice of worker safety. Great stuff there from Patrick Attwater. Make sure and check out the Tenacious blog on ergodyne.com
for more on the Pearl District project, including some pretty awesome video of the solar build itself, featuring our very own Allie Thunstrom, who, as mentioned, was actually there supporting the job site, including guiding the crew through proper use of safety gear. And Allie, I know we touched on it some with Patrick, but I was wondering if you could maybe take a minute to really dial in on the job site hazards facing the crew during that construction phase, and maybe some of the solutions used to solve for them.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Al. And, because I tend to have talked a lot lately, I actually brought in Tim and Elsie, two of our product directors, to help us better understand some of the safety work here that was deployed on that job. So Elsie comes to us from our elements pillar and Tim from our prevention pillar. So welcome in, both of you.
Hey, Allie.
Hey, Allie.
So the 180 Solar project really combined the risk of working at heights with intense Texas heat. I mean, we're talking summer Texas heat, to be exact. So Elsie, your team specializes in protecting crews from the elements, and the Solar 180 bunch really made use of their full menu of options when it came to combating heat stress, didn't they?
Yeah, Allie, they really did. So in addition to using smart administrative controls, like getting an early start on the day, that's beneficial because you're avoiding peak hours of heat, which is typically 10 to 2, and proactive preventative breaks just like throughout the day. So Patrick and the 180 Solar team, they were just really focused on the three main categories that we like to sort of use as our three pillars for heat stress prevention, which are hydration, shade, and then cooling PPE, which is going to include things like cooling vests, multi-bands, headbands. And then in addition, they were using evaporative technology, which is going to not only help keep body temps steady in the heat, but also keep them more productive and comfortable on the job.
Yeah, you mentioned the administrative controls of the early start, and I will be the first to say that was a little bit early for my liking. I think we were in the elevator heading up to the roof at 4:30 in the morning. So, I mean, but when you're dealing with that Texas heat, that's one of the important things that you have to keep track of.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice you make for the greater good.
There it is.
Yep.
So that's actually the perfect segue into the world of Tim, talking about my elevator ride at 4:30 in the morning. So the man charged with overseeing the development of solutions to prevent dropped and falling objects. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Allie.
As Patrick mentioned during our chat, this crew was working hundreds and hundreds of feet above some of San Antonio's busiest roadways. Visions of plummeting tools and airborne solar panels would keep him up at night. So let's look at some of the solutions that your team offered up that helped him rest easy, starting with the thing most folks think of when they hear drop prevention: tool lanyards. So the 180 Solar crew really used a variety of lanyard styles. So I was wondering if we could run through a few and have you point out some of the important things to know for each. How does that sound?
Oh, for sure. That sounds great.
So probably the most ubiquitous lanyard on this project was our shock absorbing FX series lanyard. What's the idea behind a lanyard design with shock absorbing properties?
Well, let me just first start by saying that there are a lot of different ways to keep a tool from falling from heights and injuring someone below, but we've gone the extra mile and developed these shock absorbing lanyards primarily to reduce the forces exerted on a worker's body when drops do occur. And that's important for a couple of reasons. It's actually amazing how much force is generated by even a 5-pound tool when it's dropped, 48 inches or so. It adds additional strain to the worker's body, and as importantly as that, it can increase the chances of a fall because that force pulls on the worker's body in unexpected ways. So that's really why we focus on shock absorbing lanyards.
Yeah, that's really great. And like you mentioned, we don't want to create a secondary risk for these guys working at heights, and having a lanyard pull on them is definitely the last thing you want. But another popular lanyard, and one that has gained so much popularity in the last year or so, is the retractable style. So can you kind of talk about the idea behind that and why somebody would choose that over, say, like you mentioned, a shock absorbing lanyard?
Yeah, there are a couple of really important reasons for this. You were just touching on, adding hazards to the work that's being done, and we can't overlook the fact that anytime you add equipment to a worker, you're introducing the possibility of additional hazards. With a traditional lanyard, as an example, when they're hanging at your side, one or more of those, you have or you face a risk of getting caught on equipment or the structure that you're working on, especially when you crouch down or kneel down, you stand back up, you might get caught on something that prevents you from readily standing back up. So that's, on the safety side of things. On the convenience side of things, retractables are really attractive because they stay out of the way when they're not in use. When you need to use the tool that you're tethering, you just pull the thing out and it'll, in many cases, stay extended while you're using the tool, give it another little tug, and it'll retract and get right out of the way again.
Yeah, that's a super good explanation, and I can completely understand why people would choose that. It's really been fun to see over the last 12 to 18 months how much tool tethering is becoming more and more commonplace on job sites. And how people are accepting adding lanyards and keeping those workers below safe. But what do you think is, one thing, there's still a lot of question marks about this category in particular. What do you kind of think are the big pain points in this conversation?
Confusion is number one. A lot of times people just have a hard time figuring out where to start, mainly what to use and how to accurately spec needs for their crew. It's understandable, given the number of options that are out there. As this has become more popular and more required, the market's just been flooded with solutions. So simplification of the category in general is a must in terms of encouraging adoption. And that was really the driving force behind our trade-specific tethering kits. Our kits give workers everything they need to tether the most popular tools of their trade, all in one box. And because it's boiled down to a simple 1-to-1 ratio, and there's one kit for one worker, it makes budgeting for what you need as easy as it gets. Again, one kit, one worker, everything you need to tether tools. It makes it much more simple and easier to understand.
That's great, Tim. I know you and I have talked a lot before in the past about simplifying and really kicking down the barriers to wider acceptance to this category. Um, kind of switching categories here for a minute back to Elsie. I know there are a lot of questions around cooling PPE, how, where to use it, how to activate it, that sort of thing. So I was wondering if you could maybe for our audience kind of dive into cooling PPE a little bit, maybe some of the science and then applications for cooling PPE.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Al, because it's not a one size fits all approach as it relates to cooling products. Evaporative products specifically, which Patrick and the 180 Solar team used, are really ideal for them and those who are working outdoors. So with evaporative products, you want to have two key components, right? You want to have water and you want to have access to airflow. Those two things combined is really what's going to kickstart and activate that technology. And without them, you're really just not going to get the ideal cooling out of that product, which is where a different technology comes in. And we won't go into that today because I do want to focus on evaporative. But, as a part of a heat prevention program, we talked a little bit about like hydration and shade, but PP is important because it's sort of like the icing on the cake. When you are wearing a cooling product, you're going to want to place it where you have large blood vessels located near the surface of your skin. So thinking around your neck or around your head, that's ultimately going to be your best bet at controlling your internal temperature. And you're also going to be a lot more comfortable. So wearing a cooling PP product, like a cooling towel around your neck, is just going to make the worker more comfortable and ultimately, more productive, which is great. There are two cooling products that I was going to touch on specific to this project, which are core cooling products. So a dry evaporative cooling vest, and then the PVA cooling vest. Core cooling is really going to be the best way to control that internal temperature. Wearing accessories is great too, but anytime you can place a cooling product on your core, you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck there. So a dry cooling vest is great because it's going to be slightly lighter weight and longer lasting than a wet evaporative cooling vest like a PVA cooling vest, but both are going to be very beneficial for anyone working in heat. A multiband, a cooling multiband specifically, is just a really great, effective, multifunctional product. So not only is it going to block wind and sun and dust and debris, but you're also going to be able to, have cooling on your neck and on your head, which is great, just very versatile.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me then, how does, cooling PPE play in with a more holistic kind of preventative approach when you kind of tie in shade and water as well?
Yeah, no, another really good question. Shade is really critical to anytime you're on a job site to a heat stress prevention program. A lot of states, federal OSHA mentions this as part of their heat prevention guidelines. And then you have 2 states, specifically Washington and California, that do require it on job sites. And the goal for shade is to block direct sunlight. You want to block direct sunlight to help cool your body down. Anytime you are in direct sunlight, it can make the perceived temperature on your skin about 15 degrees warmer. So, it's really getting out of the sun, getting out of direct sunlight, whether that be in a air-conditioned break space, which is ideal, but not always going to be an available option, right, to people working on job sites. So what you can consider are pop-up work shelters or portable work shelters, like a 10 by 10 tent, a 10 by 20 tent. Obviously, the larger it is, the more workers you can fit under the canopy, but there are also available options such as umbrellas, which are great because they're portable and they can be used in a variety of environments, whether that be on soft ground, stands on concrete. They can attach to like a trailer hitch mount, so like a truck or a van of some sort. So there are a variety of options if air-conditioned break spaces aren't available. And then as a part of kind of like the tie-in with PPE that we mentioned, shade is a great option because it provides a recovery space. So it's a place for the worker to cool down, rehydrate, and then also they can reactivate their cooling PPE.
And one thing that I saw on the 180 Solar job site specifically that it works for shade too is the amount of hard hat brim shades and neck shades to add that personal touch of shade when they're on a rooftop in the middle of Texas. There's not a ton of options, but there are still things that you can do on a personal level to protect yourself against the sun and its harmful rays as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Those are great products to use when you are not under a tent or an umbrella. And then also sometimes you can find products, with a neck shade with a cooling towel built into the back. So you're not only getting protection from the sun, but you're also getting that cooling impact as well, which is great. And then I know, Al, you were mentioning or asking kind of about just more of the whole heat stress sort of program and prevention plan and how everything comes together. And one thing we'd be remiss not to talk about is considerations for water and hydration, because that is one of the most critical, if not the most critical aspect to preventing heat-related illness. I believe they were using hydration packs on the job site, Allie?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, which is such a good option because, a dehydrated body is not going to be able to sweat fast enough to dissipate heat. So having a properly hydrated body is so important. Hydration packs are great because they're portable. You can take them anywhere. OSHA recommends that you rehydrate frequently throughout the day, about 8 ounces of water every 20 minutes. So something that's portable like a hydration pack really does give a great option to rehydrate as needed, depending on where they are or how often they need to rehydrate their bodies. They also are insulated, so they keeps the water cooler than ambient air. So just overall a really great option. And then if hydration packs can't be worn because maybe they're wearing a harness or they prefer just not to have that extra weight, portable water bottles are great too. So our portable bottle holder trap, which was actually developed by Tim's group with a primary aim of preventing dropped objects. So in addition, that's a great part of a heat stress prevention side of things.
And actually, as we wrap up, I want to go back to the topic Tim and I were speaking about, and that's kind of simplifying things for work sites. Tim, Allie, Elsie, what advice do you have for safety and site managers when it comes to maybe getting their arms around these safety risks that we're talking about here today, whether they're new to the game or just maybe reevaluating their current programs?
Sure, Al. Quite simply, if you're having trouble figuring it out, don't hesitate to ask. We do it all the time. I shared, that we've developed some solutions that are specifically about helping make this dropped object prevention category easier to understand. Our trade kits are a great example of that, but they were born out of the fact that we help a lot of safety professionals directly all the time. We take tool inventories. Allie connects them with the solutions that they need. We've boiled that experience down into some products that are in the line, but that one-on-one consultation is incredibly important and very helpful.
Great. Allie, what about you? You're constantly out on work sites having these conversations. What would you have to say to that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, at any rate, if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. But the other big thing to consider on job sites is to ask your workers. Figure out what they're dealing with. They're the ones ultimately in the heat, working at heights, and figuring out what makes them most comfortable and most productive is going to lead to so much success in implementing any type of safety program, because it's what they need and what they want. And so on top of, trying to simplify everything and keep people safe, try to give them what they want at the same time, and make sure that you're hearing them and hearing their needs to make sure that ultimately you keep them protected. And I think that's probably one of the biggest points.
So in addition to everything, Allie, that you just mentioned, I agree with all of that. I would say that OSHA does have a Water Rest and Shade campaign that they launched about 10 years ago, and they kick out that guidance again around May timeframe every year. But go on their website. They have they have a lot of great resources on their website around suggestions about how to provide water, rest, shade, come up with different preventative work rest schedules for your workers, and then just planning for emergencies and training them around different ways to make sure they're preventing heat-related illnesses. So I would be remiss not to mention to go on their website and take a look there. But then we also have a variety of different resources available, obviously, on our website. So feel free to reach out and ask anytime there's any questions specific to different types of prevention plans or cooling PPE.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say to everybody out there, on ergodyne.com, best place to find resources on heat stress and dropped objects, things like toolbox talks, just deep dives into the topic itself. You can check out the Tenacious blog, again, on ergodyne.com, and very easy to search those topics. So check that out. Elsie, Tim, thank you so much for joining us on the pod today.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, Allie.
Thanks.
I appreciate your insight, and again, really encourage everybody to check out the Tenacious blog for more info on all of these topics. Stay safe out there, people.